What is the reason why it's so hard to find out that you are intersex or that someone else is intersex? That's a very good question. When I look at my own case, the problem was really that when I was born, you couldn't really tell, just externally, uh, just a boy. I mean, looked like it, had all the requisite assets, looked perfectly normal. Wasn't really until puberty that things got a bit weird. And that was also really confusing. Also because another big factor was that I didn't know intersex existed. I didn't know it was a thing. I hadn't been taught that it existed. None of the doctors, the GPs and such, knew what it was. My parents didn't know intersex existed. My environment didn't know it existed. Nobody knew it existed. I mean, I stumbled over it during a internet search because I was at some point I had realized that hey, my body is kind of like not really the whole this male thing. Like this male thing doesn't really work for me, you know. Just doesn't feel right, doesn't seem right. Also, for years I had people looking at me and asking me questions like, "Hey, are you male or female?" Or even young children and also adults, and the whole time being seen regarded as being female back when I was supposed to be male, and that does make you question a lot of things. And because I only knew that there was this thing called transgender, something like that, transsexual. I knew that existed, so you start off with that. But like, okay, maybe I'm just something wrong body, whatever. I don't know. So spent about a week looking into that, researching and trying to just figure out whether that is relevant, whether it might actually apply to your body, that it might explain something, and it does a bit, but then you kind of trip over other things on Wikipedia and such websites, and intersex. Okay, that is this really big thing where you've got hundreds of different genetic and other conditions that can make that your body does not fit the stereotypical male or female model insofar as that is even a thing, because bodies are so diverse. So yeah, then you begin to look at your own body and you realize that, hey, wait, I actually do have hips. Weird. You begin to do more explorations, you take measurements, you begin to go like, okay, maybe there is something else going on. And that's basically how I ended up at a private clinic in Germany, getting an MRI scan. Because I was like, okay, at this point, I kind of really want to know. An ultrasound previously had supposedly not shown anything, that's what I'd been told. And yeah, I just got an MRI scan. Just paid for it. Well, my mother paid for it. And that's when I found out that I was intersex, that I am a hermaphrodite, that I have both male and female genitals. So, partially, not entirely, but female pelvis, basically skeleton female, phenotype is essentially female. You just got a weird mixture of genitals. Well, congratulations. So, since then, I've had my delayed onset of puberty. So that's when you get actually the female hormones actually kicking in instead of just being this low level for everything. So low testosterone, low estradiol, everything was really low. And suddenly you're already well into your 20s, past your 20s, and suddenly it's like, okay, let's do puberty. That's also something with because with intersex, everything you thought you knew about male, female, forget it. Like, those are stereotypes. Those are things with yeah, it's kind of like the ideal case in a physics experiment. It's like, the proverbial spherical cow in a vacuum. It's like it's cute, it's adorable. It usually is good enough for a lot of cases, but it does not cover reality, because there are a lot of cases that's just are way beyond that, the simplicity of that. I think that's um, for me, finding that out, it took way too long, absolutely. And I mean, for me, as far as I know, I'm a true hermaphrodite, chimeric, intersex. So I've got both male and female chromosomes. So two stem cell lines from two different zygotes during development, with merged and, well, twin in one. Okay. How do you tell that when you're born and there is nothing immediately obvious about a baby? I mean, you would have to test quite a few tissues to find out that, okay, you've got not just XY but also XX chromosomes. Okay, cool. It's not obvious, but puberty, it becomes. I mean, I did not have the secondary male characteristics never appeared. The normal things with you get all the hair and growth and everything gets the more masculinization didn't happen because genetically stuff just wasn't, those triggers were absent apparently, so that didn't happen. Female development during puberty kind of started, then stopped. I mean, how would you know that was going on if you don't know beforehand that a thing like that even exists? So it's really one of those things where you're like, if I had known back then that something like intersex existed, I might have actually connected the dots, maybe. But that is one of those things where, like, okay, the more information you have, the easier it gets. If you don't have the information, forget it. I mean, if you're lucky, you find it out. Just like with lots of intersex conditions. For example, you've got XY woman. It's complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, where it is essentially like you have a male zygote with, on the Y chromosome is the SRY gene, which normally is the core trigger that triggers development of a female zygote into a male zygote. That gene is broken, so that's the version from female development to male never happens, continues straight into female despite having XY chromosomes. How are you going to find that out? Or maybe you have fertility problems, and then, okay, you try to figure out why do you have so much trouble becoming pregnant, and you find out, oh, well, it's because I have CAS. Okay. But normally, how would you know? Because unless you go and test every single person, whether whether their phenotype and genotype exactly matches, and not just a single tissue being tested, but at least like 20, 30 tissues, because hey, you could be a chimera as well. Like, how do you know? Can you know? If you don't even know that something like intersex exists, then obviously it gets super complicated. So in that regard, the statistic that exists about how many people are actually intersex or have a form of intersex, they are really unreliable. It ranges from basically very few to, well, almost everyone. It's pretty insane, the whole difference you get there. So why don't you know that you're intersex right now? How could you have known? Because there's so little information. It's not being taught in schools. When doctors don't know it, when nobody really knows it's even a thing, how can you be expected if your environment doesn't know it? If the specialists were supposed to be these fountainheads of wisdom on medical conditions, if they don't know, then how are you expected to know? I guess what I would have liked was that it had been a thing that was already known, that I didn't have to figure this all out myself. That's because one important essential aspect with intersex conditions is also that they're not harmful. I mean, for me, the worst thing that it did for me was that I am not fertile, not as male, not as female, because it just didn't. Neither side developed far enough. But that's not a health complication. That's more like, well, I mean, if I had stayed on the male path and pretended to be male and somehow, I don't know, then might have found out later that, oh, well, yeah, I'm sorry, I cannot make anyone pregnant because the right components do not all function properly. So, yeah. I mean, I found out that the testicles that were there, that they were not fully developed, but that took a complete removal of the testicles and a biopsy of those testicles. That's not something you just casually do. For me, that also took many years, and only in the process of, well, I want to change my official gender from male to female because that is simply way easier for me in daily life, and that requires the orchiectomy. Only because of that did I find out, okay, because of the biopsy, what was going on there. Okay, well, stuff just didn't develop. Stuff just kind of went halfway and then stopped. But how would you know? Unless you have a medical degree in intersex studies or something. I don't know. So yeah, why don't you know that you're intersex? Nobody told you. Nobody knows. Nobody knows intersex exists, and that is a really pretty sad thing, really, when it comes down to it. So I hope that answers that question.